Hello, MSCS students! Who doesn't want to make money using stocks? That's why I thought it was a good idea to take the ML4T, which is the machine learning for trading course. It just seems so promising, well, at least at first. So without further ado, let's get started. When I took this course, it has 8 assignments and 2 exams, and a few quizzes that wasn't really worth much. The first 4 assignments are all pretty easy, and didn't really seem relevant to trading at all. I do find it unfortunate if you already have a coding background. It just seems kind of unnecessary. Also, for those who don't have a coding background, it's not really enough to give you a solid foundation that you might as well just take an intro to ComSci course or something. Assignment 1 was on this Russian roulette game, where you can just check the Wikipedia for rules. You have to code simulations for the game using their strategy of betting, which they give it the pseudocode. So that is pretty easy. One tip I have is to make sure the probability to win is not 50%. You gotta actually count the number of squares on the roulette. Assignment 2 is on optimization. You can basically just use the methods from Pandas and NumPy library, so that makes things so much easier. One thing I got stumped on is for the standard deviation function, there's a difference between the NumPy version and the Pandas version. In particular, the default parameter is different. Assignment 3 is on decision trees and random forests. They also expected you to implement a random tree learner, which is basically the same as decision tree, except the feature you split on is random. The only challenge is that they don't let you use OOP, so you have to represent the tree using a NumPy array. Assignment 4 is too easy to be true. It was asking you to make a dataset that works better with decision tree than linear regression, and they also give you a sample, which you can really just tweak some numbers if you don't want to come up with new ones. But even if you do, you can still finish this in like a few minutes. The next 4 assignments are finally a bit more relevant to the finance part. Assignment 5 is on a market simulator, where they expect you to compute portfolio values given transactions. So just like the previous assignments, you just gotta do as they say. It's pretty simple. Just follow the formula for calculating portfolio value. One thing to note is that they added calculations of SPX stats to compare with your portfolio in the sample testing code, which is entirely optional, and I wasted some time working on it just to realize you don't have to. Assignment 6 requires picking 5 technical indicators to predict stocks. However, it was just incredibly long compared to the other assignments, and that really threw me off, so make sure you start early. Not gonna lie, each indicator really felt like it's long enough to be an assignment by itself, because they didn't actually mention all of them in the lecture, so you gotta do your own additional research. You can find them from Fidelity or anywhere else. One thing to know is that they require each indicator to only return 1 vector, and there are some indicators which returns 2 vectors. I just thought it's way too troublesome to modify them, so I just avoid using the ones that returns multiple vectors. Assignment 7 is on Q learning, and if you've taken any introduction to AI courses in undergrad or in grad school, it's the same stuff. The only challenge is to get everything to pass within the time limits, which I found the traditional version using transition tables is incredibly slow. Thank goodness we were allowed to use buffer queue and combined queue, and that really saved me big time. Saving the worst till last, assignment 8 is the final boss of this course. They expected you to pick 35 indicators from the ones you picked in assignment 6 and actually use them on a trading bot. There are 2 general ways to build your bot, either using a queue learner or random forest learner. I tried the queue learner version at first, and it was honestly so difficult to tweak the parameters. It's like if I tweak one parameter, then it fixes one thing but it breaks another. There was definitely a lot more work you have to do, because you also have to account for the environment. But for RS Learner, you can just reuse most of your code from assignment 3. One thing that really threw me off was I thought we were allowed to execute the trade any point after we received the trade signal from our agent. However, much later, after the assignment was posted, there was a post by the staff saying that it was mandatory to execute the trade exactly 1 day after you received the signal, which really makes no sense to me. I basically had to redo my entire strategy, and I really didn't have the time to optimize everything, so I wasn't able to get all the points, but I'm pretty sure you guys can do it if you start early enough. The exams are somehow closed book. This is actually the very first closed book I took in OMSCS, but they did mention that they didn't always have closed books, so maybe it could change for you. I don't know. I just studied using some flashcards and also reviewing the lectures. I also got very lucky. There was a kind soul who actually posted lecture notes. Super grateful to them. Quizzes weren't really worth much, but they are worth something, and I really suggest doing them as you go through the lectures, because I find that I basically forgot a good amount of stuff as I was working through new assignments and watching new lectures. But of course, you can always go back to previous lectures since it's open book. In conclusion, can you make money with trading? Well, yes, but that is under the assumption that you have enough money to start with. And basically every strategy we talked about in this course is assuming that you have enough money to invest. But if you have that much money, you probably don't really need the extra income. But it would be nice to have. I remember very clearly there was this one lecture where the professor talked about you can make about 20% of your starting value, but it's assuming luck is on your side and you didn't end up losing money.